Good friends who come to read this book, strip yourselves first of affectation. Do not assume a pained, shocked look, for it contains no foul infection, yet teaches you no great perfection, but lessons in the mirthful art, the only subject for my heart. When I see grief consume and rot you, mirth's my theme and tears are not, for laughter is man's proper lot. Most noble boozers, and you, my very esteemed and poxy friends, for to you and you alone are my writings dedicated. Have you ever picked a lock to steal a bottle? Good for you! Call to mind your expression at the time. Or did you ever see a dog, which is, as Plato says in the second book of his Republic, the most philosophical creature in the world, discover a marrow bone? If ever you did, you will have noticed how devotedly he eyes it, how carefully he guards it, how fervently he holds it, how circumspectly he begins to gnaw it, how lovingly he breaks it, and how diligently he licks it. What induces him to do all this? What hope is there in his labor? What benefit does he expect? Nothing more than a little marrow. It is true that this little is more delicious than great quantities of any other meat, for, as Galen says in his third book, on the natural faculties, and in his 11th, on the parts of the body and their functions, marrow is the perfect food concocted by nature. Now, you must follow this dog's example and be wise in smelling out, sampling, and relishing these fine and most juicy books, which are easy to run down but hard to bring to bay. Then, by diligent reading and frequent meditation, you must break the bone and lick out the substantial marrow. That is to say, the meaning which I intend to convey by these Pythagorean symbols, in the hope and assurance of becoming both wiser and more courageous by such reading. For knowledge of the Gargantua's genealogy and of the antiquity of his descent, I refer you to the great Pantagrueline Chronicle, from which you will learn at greater length how the giants were born into this world, and how from them by a direct line issued Gargantua, the father of Pantagruel. And to give you some information about myself who address you, believe that I am descended from some wealthy king or prince of the olden days. For you have never met a man with a greater desire to be a king or to be rich than I, so that I may entertain liberally, do no work, have no worries, and plentifully reward my friends, as well as all worthy and learned men. But I comfort myself with one thought, that in the other world I shall be all this, and greater still than at present I dare even to wish. So console yourselves in your misfortunes, too, with as good thoughts, or better, and drink lustily if you can get the liquor. Now to return to our muttons. Let me say that Grangousier and Gargamel were anxiously awaiting the birth of their first child, as Gargamel had been carrying Gargantua for 11 months in her belly. Whilst they were pleasantly tattling on the subject of drinking, Gargamel began to feel disturbed in her lower parts. Whereupon Grangousier got up from the grass and comforted her kindly, thinking that these were birth pangs, and telling her that since she had been resting under the willows, she would soon be in a good state. She ought to take new heart, he said, at the coming of her new baby. For although the pains would be somewhat severe, they would nevertheless be quickly over, and the joy which would follow after would banish all her pain, so that only the memory of it would be left. "Have a sheep's courage," he said. "Bring this boy into the world, and we'll soon make another." "Ah," she answered, "it's easy for you men to talk. Well, I swear to God I'll do my best, since you ask it of me, but I wish to heaven you had cut it off." "What?" said Grangousier. "Ah," she said, just like a man. "You know what I mean well enough." "My member?" he said. By the blood of all the goats, send for a knife if that's what you want." "Oh," she said, "God forbid, God forgive me. I didn't really mean it. Don't do anything to it on account of anything I say, but I shall have trouble enough today, unless God helps me, all on account of your member, and just because I wanted to please you." "Take heart," he said. "Don't you worry, but let the 4 leading oxen do the work. I'll go and take another swig. If any pain comes on you in the meantime, I shan't be far off. Give me a shout, and I'll be with you." A little while later she began to groan and wail and shout. Then suddenly swarms of midwives came up from every side, and feeling her underneath, found some rather ill-smelling excrescences, which they thought were the child. But it was her fundament slipping out, because of the softening of her right intestine, which you call the bum gut, owing to her having eaten too much tripe, as has been stated above. At this point, a dirty old hag of the company, who had the reputation of being a good she-doctor, and had come from Brisepay, near Saint-Genou, 60 years before, made her an astringent, so horrible that all her sphincter muscles were stopped and constricted. Indeed, you could hardly have relaxed them with your teeth, which is a most horrible thought, even if you had copied the method of the devil at the Mass of St. Martin, when he wrote down the chatter of 2 local girls and stretched his parchment by tugging with his teeth. By this misfortune, the cotyledons of the matrix were loosened at the top, and the child leaped up through them to enter the hollow vein. Then, climbing through the diaphragm to a point above the shoulders where this vein divides in 2, he took the left fork and came out by the left ear. As soon as he was born, he cried out, not like other children, "Mise, mise," but "Drink, drink, drink," as if inviting the whole world to drink, and so loud that he was heard through all the lands of booze and bibulus. I doubt whether you will truly believe in this strange nativity. I don't care if you don't. But an honest man, a man of good sense, always believes what he is told and what he finds written down. Is this a violation of our law or our faith? Is it against reason or against Holy Scripture? For my part, I find nothing written in the Holy Bible which contradicts it. If this had been the will of God, would you say that he could not have performed it? For goodness sake, do not obfuscate your brains with such an idle thought. For I say to you that to God nothing is impossible. If it had been his will, women would have produced their children in that way, by the ear, forever afterwards. Was not Bacchus begotten by Jupiter's thigh? Was not Roctaillade born from his mother's heel, and Croquebouche from his nurse's slipper? Was not Minerva born from Jupiter's brain by way of his ear, and Adonis from the bark of a myrrh tree, and Castor and Pollux from the shell of an egg laid and hatched by Leda? But you would be even more flabbergasted if I were now to expound to you the whole chapter of Pliny in which he speaks of strange and unnatural births. But anyway, I'm not such a barefaced liar as he was. Read chapter 3 of the 7th book of his natural history, and don't tease my brain any more on the subject. While that good man Grangousier was drinking and joking with the others, he heard the horrible cry made by his son as he entered the world and bawled out for "Drink! Drink! Drink!" Whereupon he said, "Que Gargantua!" What a big one you've got. The gullet being understood. And when they heard this, the company said that the child ought properly to be called Gargantua, after the example of the ancient Hebrew custom, since that had been the first word pronounced by his father at his birth. The father agreed to their suggestion. It was most pleasing to the mother as well, and to quiet the child they gave him enough drink to break his larynx. Then he was carried to the font and there baptized, as is the habit of all good Christians. His father ordered clothes to be made for him, of his own colors, which were white and blue. So they set to work, and clothes were made, cut, and sewn for him in the fashion of the day. In the ancient records, which are in the Chamber of Accounts at Montsoreau, I find that he was dressed in the following manner. His shirt required 1,350 yards of Châtellerault linen, and 300 for the gussets, which were square, and put in under the armpits, not gathered. For the gathering of shirts was not invented until seamstresses, having broken the points of their needles, began to work with their other ends. His doublet took 1,219 yards of white satin, and his points 1,509 dogskins and a half. His codpiece took 24 1/4 yards of the same stuff, and its shape was that of a bowed arch, well and gallantly fastened by 2 fine gold buckles with 2 enamelled clasps, in each of which was set a huge emerald the size of an orange. For, as Orpheus says in his book of precious stones, and Pliny in his final book, this fruit has an erective virtue, and is encouraging to the natural member. His cape took up 2,400 yards of blue velvet dyed in the grain, embroidered all round with fine scallops, and in the middle with pint pots in silver thread, looped together by gold bands freely studded with pearls, in this way denoting that he would knock back a pretty pint in his day. From his 3rd to his 5th year, Gargantua was brought up and disciplined in all necessary ways, such being his father's orders, and he spent that time in the same manner as the other little children of that country, that is to say, in drinking, eating, and sleeping, in eating, sleeping, and drinking, in sleeping, drinking, and eating. About the end of Gargantua's 5th year, Grangousier visited his son on the way back from his victory over the Canarians, and he was filled with joy, as such a father would be at the sight of such a child. Whilst he kissed him and embraced him, he asked the boy various childish questions of one kind and another, and he drank quite a bit, too, with him and his governesses, of whom he most earnestly inquired whether they had kept him sweet and clean. To this Gargantua answered that he had taken these precautions himself, and that there was not a cleaner boy in all the land. "How did you do that?" asked Grangousier. "By long and curious experiments," replied Gargantua. "I have invented a method of wiping my ass, which is the most lordly, the most excellent, and the most convenient that ever was seen." And he explained it in detail. This discourse concluded, that good man Grangousier was beside himself with admiration, as he considered the fine sense and marvellous understanding of his son Gargantua. So he said to the governesses, "Let me tell you that from this single discussion which I have just held before you with my son Gargantua, I recognize that his understanding springs from some divine source, so acute, subtle, profound, and assured do I find him in his answers. He will certainly attain a sovereign degree of wisdom, if he is well taught. Therefore I wish to entrust him to some learned man, who will instruct him according to his capacities, and to this end I will spare no cost." Accordingly, they appointed as his tutor a great doctor and sophist named Thubal Holofernes, who taught him his letters so well that he said them by heart backwards, and he took 5 years and 3 months to do that. Then the sophist read to him Donatus, Facitus, Theodolus, and Alanus in Parabolis, which took 13 years, 6 months, and a fortnight. But note that during all this time he was teaching Gargantua to write the Gothic script, and that he copied all these books out himself, for the art of printing was not yet practiced. After this the sophist read him the Compostum, on which he spent 16 years and 2 months, at which point his said preceptor died. In the year 1420 he caught the pox. Meanwhile, as Gargantua grew, his father observed that although he was really studying very well and spent all his time at his lessons, he was making no progress at all. What was worse, he was becoming quite sawney and simple, all dreamy and doltish. When Grangousier complained of this to Don Philippe de Marais, Viceroy of Papeligos, that gentleman answered that it was better for the boy to learn nothing than to study such books under such masters, for their learning was mere stupidity, and their wisdom like an empty glove. It bastardized good and noble minds and corrupted all the flower of youth. Grangousier consulted with the viceroy as to what master they should choose for the lad. They decided between them that the post should be given to Ponocrates, and that they should all go to Paris together to learn what the young men of France were studying at that time. Gargantua's education was a thorough one, but he was most often lauded for his innovative practical applications of that education. He proved himself able in all situations, social, political, and most notably military. He was a well-respected man and a judicious leader of other men, both on and off the battlefield. Gargantua wanted to provide for the monk who had served him so faithfully and valiantly, and he wanted to make him abbot of Seilly, but he refused the post. He next proposed to give him the Abbey of Bourgueil, or of Saint-Florent, whichever would suit him better, or both if he fancied them, but the monk answered categorically that he wanted neither charge nor government of monks. "For how should I be able to govern others," he said, "when I don't know how to govern myself? If it seems to you that I have done you, and may in the future do you, welcome service, give me leave to found an abbey after my own devices." This request pleased Gargantua, and he offered him all his land of Theleme, beside the river Loire, to within 6 miles of the great forest of Port-Huon. The monk then requested Gargantua to institute his religious order in an exactly contrary way to all others. "First of all, then," said Gargantua, "you mustn't build walls round it, for all other abbeys have lofty walls, murs." "Yes," said the monk, "and not without reason. Where there's a mur before and a mur behind, there are plenty of murmurs, envy, and mutual conspiracy. Moreover, seeing that in certain monasteries in this world it is the custom that if any woman enters, I speak of chaste and honest women, they wash the place where she trod, it was ordained that if any monk or nun happened to enter here, the spot where he or she had stood should be scrupulously washed likewise. And because in the religious foundations of this world everything is encompassed, limited, and regulated by hours, it was decreed that there should be no clock or dial at all, but that affairs should be conducted according to chance and opportunity. For Gargantua said that the greatest waste of time he knew was the counting of hours. What good does it do? And the greatest nonsense in the world was to regulate one's life by the sound of a bell instead of by the promptings of reason and good sense. Item, because at that time they put no women into religious houses unless they were one-eyed, lame, hunchbacked, ugly, malformed, lunatic, half-witted, bewitched, and blemished, or men that are not sickly, low-born, stupid, or a burden on their family. "By the way," said the monk, "if a woman is neither fair nor good, what can you do with her?" "Make her a nun," said Gargantua. "Yes," said the monk, "and a seamstress of shirts." It was decreed that here no women should be admitted unless they were beautiful, well-built, and sweet-natured, nor any men who were not handsome, well-built, and of pleasant nature also. Item, because men never entered nunneries except secretly and by stealth, it was decreed that here there should be no women when there were no men, and no men when there were no women. Item, because both men and women once accepted into a monastic order after their novitiate year were compelled and bound to remain forever so long as they lived, it was decreed that both men and women once accepted could depart from there whenever they pleased without let or hindrance. Item, because ordinarily monks and nuns made 3 vows, that is, of chastity, poverty, and obedience, it was decreed that there anyone could be regularly married, could become rich, and could live at liberty. With regard to the lawful age of entry, the women were to be received at from 10 to 15, and men at from 12 to 18. For the building and furnishing of the abbey, Gargantua had counted out in ready money 2,700,831 fine gold Agnus Dei crowns. And for every year until the work was completed, he assigned out of his income from the river Dive 1,669,000 sun crowns, and an equal number stamped with the sign of Pleiades. While for its foundation and upkeep he granted in perpetuity 2,369,000 rose nobles as a freehold endowment, exempt from all burdens and services, and payable every year at the Abbey gate, and this he confirmed in due letters patent. The said building was 100 times more magnificent than Bonnivet or Chambord or Chantilly, for it contained 9,332 apartments, each one provided with an inner chamber, a closet, wardrobe, and chapel, and each one giving on a great hall. Between each tower, in the middle of the said main building, was an internal winding stair, the steps of which were some of porphyry, some of Numidian marble, and some of serpentine, but all 22 feet broad, 3 inches thick, and 12 in number between each landing. On each landing there was a fine old-fashioned double arcade through which the light was admitted, and through it one entered a lattice-windowed closet of the breadth of the stairway. The steps went on to the roof, and there ended in a pavilion. By this same stair there was an entrance on each side into a great hall, and from the halls into the apartments. From the Arctic Tower to the Crier Tower ran the fine great libraries of Greek, Latin, Hebrew, French, Italian, and Spanish books, divided story by story according to their languages. In the center was a marvelous winding staircase, the entrance to which was on the outside of the building through an arch 36 feet wide, and this was built of such size and symmetry that 6 men-at-arms with lance in rest could ride abreast up to the top of the whole building. Between the Anatole Tower and the Messembrine Tower were fine, wide galleries, all painted with ancient feats of arms, histories, and views of the world, and in the middle was a similar ascent and gate to the one described on the river side. Above this gate was written in large Gothic letters the following inscription: "Enter not here vile hypocrites and bigots, pious old apes, and puffed-up snivellers, wry-necked creatures thornier than the Goths, or Ostrogoths, precursors of Gog and Magog, woe-begone scoundrels, mock-godly sandal-wearers, beggars in blankets, flagellating canters, hooted-at, pot-bellied, stirrers-up of troubles. Get along elsewhere to sell your dirty swindles. Your hideous deceits would fill my fields and streets with villainy, and with their falsity would untune my song's notes. Your hideous deceits. Enter not here lawyers insatiable, ushers, lawyers' clerks, devourers of the people, holders of office, scribes and Pharisees, ancient judges who tie up good citizens like stray dogs with cord on their necks. Your reward is earned now, and it is the gibbet. So go and bray there. Here is done no violence, such as in your courts sets men fighting lawsuits. Lawsuits and wrangling set us not jangling. We come here for pleasure, but may your leisure be filled up with tangling, lawsuits and wrangling. Enter not here miserly usurers, gluttons and lechers, everlasting gatherers, tricksters and swindlers, mean pettifoggers, hunchbacked and snub-nosed, who in your lockers never have enough gold, coin, and silver. However much you pocket, you're never satisfied. You pile up still more, you mean-featured dastards. May cruel death for this spoil your faces. Most hideous of faces, take them and their grimaces, shave them elsewhere, for here they're out of place, I fear. Shift them to other places, most hideous of faces. Enter not here, you rambling mastiff curs, morning nor evening, jealous, old, and spiteful, nor you either, seditious mutineers, spirits, goblins, and fond husbands familiars, Greeks or Latins, more to be feared than wolves, nor you with your sores, gnawed to the bone by pox. Take your ulcers elsewhere, and show them to others, scabby from head to toe and brimful of dishonor. Grace, honor, praise, and light are here our sole delight. Of them we make our song. Our limbs are sound and strong. This blessing fills us quite. Grace, honor, praise, and light. Enter in here, and you shall be most welcome. And having come, stay, noble gentlemen. Here is the place where income comes in well, and having come affords good entertainment for great and small, though thousands of them come. Be then my cronies, my especial favorites, merry and nimble, jolly, gay and sprightly, and in a word the best of good companions. All worthy gentlemen, keen-witted and serene, from every coarseness free, here find civility. Among your hosts will reign all worthy gentlemen. Enter in here, you who preach with vigor Christ's holy gospel. Never mind who scoffs, here you will find a refuge and a tower against the foeman's error, the picked arguments which falsely seek to spread about their poison. Enter here, let us found a faith profound, and then let us confound by speech and writing all that are the foemen of the Holy Writ. Our Holy Writ and word forever shall be heard in this most holy spot. Each wears it on his heart, each wears it as a sword, our Holy Writ and word. Enter in here, you ladies of high lineage. Here be frank and fearless, enter gaily in, flowers of all beauty, with heaven in your faces. Upright in bearing, modest in behavior, here you will find the dwelling place of honor. That noble gentleman, who of this place was donor, and gives rewards, has destined it for you. He has provided gold sufficient for its upkeep. Gold freely given, a man's freely shriven, in exchange for rewards, for it brings rewards to all mortal men, gold freely given. All their life was regulated, not by laws, statutes, or rules, but according to their free will and pleasure. They rose from bed when they pleased, and drank, ate, worked, and slept when the fancy seized them. Nobody woke them, nobody compelled them either to eat or to drink, or to do anything else whatever. So it was that Gargantua had established it. In their rules there was only one clause: do what you will. Because people who are free, well-born, well-bred, and easy in honest company have a natural spur and instinct which drives them to virtuous deeds and deflects them from vice, and this they called honor. When these same men are depressed and enslaved by vile constraint and subjection, they use this noble quality, which once impelled them freely towards virtue, to throw off and break this yoke of slavery. For we always strive after things forbidden, and covet what is denied us. Making use of this liberty, they most laudably rivaled one another, in all of them doing what they saw pleased one. If some man or woman said, "Let us drink," they all drank. If he or she said, "Let us play," they all played. If it was, "Let us go and amuse ourselves in the fields," everyone went there. If it were for hawking or hunting, the ladies, mounted on fine mares with their grand palfreys following, each carried on their daintily gloved wrists a sparrowhawk, a laneret, or a merlin, the men carrying the other birds. So nobly were they instructed that there was not a man or woman among them who could not read, write, sing, play musical instruments, speak 5 or 6 languages, and compose in them both verse and prose. Never were seen such worthy knights, so valiant, so nimble, both on foot and horse. Knights more vigorous, more agile, handier with all weapons than they were. Never were seen ladies so good-looking, so dainty, less tiresome, more skilled with the fingers and the needle, and in every free and honest womanly pursuit than they were. For that reason, when the time came that anyone in that abbey, either at his parents' request or for any other reason, wished to leave it, he took with him one of the ladies, the one who had accepted him as her admirer. And they were married to one another. And if at Telem they had lived in devotion and friendship, they lived in still greater devotion and friendship when they were married. Indeed, they loved one another to the end of their days as much as they had done on their wedding day.